This is another Hoops and Dreams preview show. We'll be previewing Tuesday's QPR versus Blackburn evening fixture. Alongside me is George. How are you doing, George?
I'm feeling much better, thank you, Brian. Obviously, I weren't on the last preview, but no, I'm feeling much better now and delighted to be back.
Good to have you. Without further ado, then let's look back at Saturday's derby at the Den against Millwall. Always a tough place to go, and you know what to expect, I suppose. And that's just on the pitch, of course. An end-to-end game that ended with Millwall winning 2-1. Marty fielded what looked to be the best side he could get under the circumstances, with Dunne's sudden withdrawal, which apparently was a groin strain. He was covered by Edwards rather than Ashby, and Steve Cook returned because he was needed in centre back alongside Fox. And Parle, as usual, was over on the left back. And the only other change really was Lloyd up front. The game was end to end. Sadly, once Millwall took the early lead, you never felt the R's dominance would be enough. So was the result a fair reflection of the game, George?
I think it's a frustrating game for sure because the two goals we conceded were two very poor defensively, especially that. Well, but I can't really justify either of them, to be honest. The first one, the fact that the ball's got so far, first of all, I think is ridiculous, and then the shot that Connolly's managed to get off, it's gone through Edwards' legs, and then Nardi's almost dived the other way, and it's like it's unlucky in some ways, but I think it's just poor defensively, and the goal that we it looked like one of them goals that we conceded earlier on in the season. I thought that maybe left our system. Um, Lloyd, obviously the best reaction that you could have, really, isn't it? Going down the other end and scoring. Lloyd, fair credit to him. I've given him some criticalness on here before, but it was a good finish from him. To be honest, good ball from Morgan, and he took it well, Lloyd. Um, and then I thought, oh, I'll just see it out to half time. And I thought we were going to be the dominant team second half, as it proved that we were. But then it's just, I can't believe it. The right back's managed to get the ball into the box. Good header, to be fair. He's got up for it well. It's hit the bar. But then it's the zero reactions from any of them. And particularly Morgan Fox, he's let the smallest player on the pitch, Cundall, get the other side of him and tap it in. So I think it's just really poor defensively. And when you dig yourself that hole of a two-goal deficit, it's going to be difficult, isn't it, to come back into the game. And I thought second half there was a lot of positives. I thought that we created some good chances, but it's a really frustrating game. I don't think the result was a fair reflection. But if you make defensive mistakes like that, you can't really justify wanting to win the game. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, Steve Cook, and there's a shot of him on the highlights, just throwing his hands out in despair at Morgan Fox, and he's right. I mean, he just seemed to be like a tourist there at that point. It was really a shame. Anyway, I felt the first goal would be important in this game, more important even than usual. And both of their goals were the results of indecision at the back. You know, I agree with you on this. Millwall quite happy to crowd out their goal area and defend, and they defended well. I mean, let's be honest. I lost count of the number of chances we had, and they just used their breaks down the wings very successfully. I didn't think it was Powell's best day by far. I thought he had a poor day, and unfortunately, he was chaired. He was palled up with Morgan Fox. Neither of them had a good day, so that made that wing particularly vulnerable. And we didn't convert that dominant possession, in the second half. We didn't make balls into goals, and that as simple as that. We also missed, I have to say, Jimmy Dunne. Anything Marty or Xavi could have done, you felt, to make things better, George?
I don't think there was much more they could do. I think the Jimmy Dunne absence, as much as he's a critical player for us, and the aerial presence he brings, he gives you that outlet ball out from the back, just in case you can't play out, you can then play longer to him at the halfway line. I think the idea of the squad losing their main right back as well, it created such a big impact. And Edwards, it was annoying for him because he looked so unnatural there, and it looked like he hadn't even trained there. And from the start, especially first half, the squad looked like they'd lost their right back at such short notice. And I think it was, as much as Xavi's saying that it was a groin problem, who knows? There's obviously loads of speculation. So I think the squad looked like they'd lost such a pivotal part of the team, and particularly playing against Millwall, who, to be fair to them, they played a typical Millwall, Alex Neil way. They broke down play, they played for set pieces, and without Jimmy Dunne in there, who's such an aerial presence, it was always going to be difficult. So I think in terms of team management, team lineup, I don't think Xavi and Marty could have done anything different. Um, yeah, it's frustrating because the team looked like they'd lost Jimmy Dunne at short notice, and I think it was just such a big blow. And it's annoying for Edwards because he looked like he hadn't played there. So, and then that had a bigger effect because I think Cook, perhaps it was a game too early for him. He was lacking that bit of sharpness. Some of the balls he was playing just weren't at his normal top level. So I think it was just frustrating to see because it was so obvious that Jimmy Dunne was missed.
Yeah, I mean, pulling over Edwards to cover for him at short notice obviously didn't help. And I have to think that maybe Steve Cook, it probably should have been Morrison instead of him. But definitely not Ashby. I don't want him anywhere near the team at the moment. Your player of the match, George, and why?
So this was tough for me because I think my player of the match would have to go to Varane again, to be honest with you. And I know that it's not he weren't exactly highlighted well, but I was watching it even in the first half. Some of the tackles he was making, he just break down the play, and he just looks like such a top player at the moment. But I can't really give him man of the match because he didn't play long enough. But top credit to Saito when he came onto the pitch because he created so many chances down that left hand side. Every single time he had the better of their right back, someone who I thought was their best player, particularly first half. Um, he just got the better of them. So I think Saito did well when he came on, but in terms of the game as a whole, I'd give it to Varane.
Okay, and that's a fair shout. I've got to say, I mean, my vote for player of the match goes to one of the two youngsters because right at the beginning, before this match, I sort of said we really shouldn't be exposing them perhaps to Millwall at this stage. They probably deserve a rest. But no, it put Lloyd up front, who was not intimidated, and Morgan, and his coverage on the pitch and doggedness was superb. So I would give it to one of those two, to be quite honest. So between us, we've gone for three players, so it's not bad going. Um, Anyway, this loss against Millwall means QPR drops to 14th place in the table, still on 38 points, of course. Um, there's been optimism that we were moving towards a top six finish, but now we have two losses against Sheffield Wednesday and Millwall. Are the wheels starting to fall off again, George?
I certainly hope not. I think that the prospect of us losing one game, it was always then a high chance that we were going to lose two on the bounce because that's what usually happens with teams who go on runs. They usually then lose two or three in a row. And I just hope it's not a sign of a bigger run to come because that'd just be QPR on a tee, wouldn't it? Because we are so inconsistent. We could go on a run of win only losing one in 13 and then lose five on the trot, but that's just QPR for you. But I think you look at the positives and you look at it from an outside perspective of a couple of months ago we were bottom of the league, and if you had showed me that we're 14th at this stage, I would have snapped your hand off for it, honestly. And we're still only 6 points outside the playoffs. And as much as we had the optimism of, oh great, we were pushing, we'd only lost one in 13, and we were looking like such a great side. And I think there are still positives. I think there was positives at Mill, especially second half with some of the chances we created and our domination. I just think that this season you've got to think about it realistically, and there's so many teams who are fighting for that fifth and sixth place, who have squads that I think are better than us. As much as we might not want to admit that, we haven't got the strongest squad this year, and I think particularly with injuries, Marty's done really well to get us out of the position we were in. So. If I had looked at this table a couple of months ago and seen us in 14th, I would have snapped your hand off for it. So I'm thinking of it as more of a grateful situation, and I'm happy where we are. We're still, is it 8 points clear of relegation, something like that? So I think, yeah, that's just incredible to think about the position we were in a couple of months ago.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. Okay, well, time to move on to previewing our championship clash between QPR and Blackburn on Tuesday. Uh, Courtesy of my care home, I'm travelling up from the south coast for this one. The carers have let me out. And I feel it will be a challenge, really, after two defeats. It has to be. It's not helped by knowing that in the 36 encounters between Blackburn and QPR, QPR have only won six of those. So that's a wee bit one-sided, don't you think, George?
Yeah, it seems like they're a bogey team for us, to be honest.
Yeah, it's true. I think they are a bogey side. And we always seem to struggle against bogey sides. We really do. I don't know why. Um, Blackburn's recent results are a bit of a conundrum as they are sitting near the playoffs, but they've lost three games in a row in the last, I think, five games. QPR sitting mid-table, who equally had a mixed bag of results, we've got to admit. Um, Blackburn's last match was at home against Preston North End, which they won 2-1. And I should point out that that match was held on Friday, so they've had an extra day to recover and deal with any injury niggles. So, George, a worthy opponent for the R's?
I think they're very similar sort of task that we had against Millwall, to be honest, because I think they're very similar teams. I think if you're Blackburn, you're frustrated because they were going to play us on a Saturday, it gives you that bit of extra time to travel, but now they're having to travel down on a Tuesday night. So if that happened to us, we'd be annoyed. But Blackburn, I think they're a well-drilled team. They started off the season really good, particularly at home. I think they had the best home record in the league for a good few months. Um, they're good defensively. I think they're fifth in the league for clean sheets. But the most important thing I look at is they're a physical team. I think they're second in the league for cards per match, below Preston and level with Millwall actually.
Okay.
Um, if you look at it that way, very typical northern side, and it's going to be a tight game, and I expect it to be very much like Mill. They're a team full of championship experience. I could list out so many players: Travis, Dolan, Buckley, Vyman, Cantwell, all players who have been around the EFL for so many years, and they just seem like a really tough team to beat. And it's one of them games where you don't want to go a goal behind, as you said, especially at Millwall. I know we reacted well to it and we scored a couple of minutes later, but going behind in a hostile environment like that, you wouldn't want. And this is a team where if you give them something to hold on to, they'll be the typical dive around everywhere, be like that because that's how they play, and fair dues to them because I think they're fifth in the league now. So for them, it's a really successful season. So I think it'll be a tight game, and it's just one of them where you really don't want to go behind.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, I was looking at the stats, and Andreas Weimann has six goals. He's their top scorer at the moment. And as you say, they've had a good number of clean sheets. And that leads me to think that they're difficult to beat. And perhaps also they're not scoring that many goals. So it's sort of narrow victories all the time, I think. Um, we've talked about the other players that we need to look out for. I don't think anybody at QPR is going to be that surprised by this. They'll be well versed in what, them. They'll have done their analysis. Um, Someone we all know well at Blackburn is, of course, John Eustace, their manager. Eustace was Michael Beale's assistant when he was at Loftus Road and was probably the honest half of the combo. I think he's doing a good job at Blackburn, George. What about you?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think he was Mark Warburton's assistant. Um,
Oh,
when he was when he was at the club, I'm pretty sure it was Warburton's assistant. But for him, I think it was good because he inherited a job at Birmingham, didn't he? And he did. I thought he did a really solid job there. He got them into the playoffs in the Championship, and then they made the very bizarre decision of sacking him and bringing in Wayne Rooney, which completely threw their season and eventually led to their relegation. So
yeah.
for him to then get another chance in the Championship with Blackburn, he must have been grateful for. And I think the football we plays will be somewhat similar to the way that we played under Warburton. And I think it's good because Blackburn have kept with him for a while now. I think he's been there for a couple of seasons. So he'll have a style of football. They'll be a well-drilled team. And yeah, I think it for him, especially with the situation that happened at Birmingham, I'm glad that he got another job in the Championship because even when he was at QPR, there was a stage where he took in as interim for a few games, and we played some decent football, and I always thought he was a good assistant with Warburton. So they'll be a well-drilled team and definitely hard to beat.
Yeah, thanks for correcting me on that. Yeah, leaving aside your prediction till the end, George. I mean, what do you feel about this fixture? You're optimistic or full of trepidation or what?
I'm honestly, this is one of them where I'm really confused. I think it can I think it could go either way. We've lost two in a row, and then if you start losing three on a row, I think that brings bigger alarm bells. Um, as I've mentioned, I think it'll be a really tough game. I think they'll come into it with the idea of hoping to get that early goal to then sit deep and invite pressure. Um, So, and I think that's potentially something that we struggle with. I think we play better against teams who come at us because we then have more space to create, and it almost encourages us to play quicker because we play our best football when we're playing quick, and when we're playing slow against a team who just want to break down play, I think we're at our worst. But I think if we can particularly keep it 0-0 in the first half or potentially nick an early goal, I think second half it could be much like Millwall in terms of we start to dominate. So I'm a bit optimistic for this game. I think if we can continue how we finished off against Millwall, and I'd still even think against Sheffield Wednesday we didn't start the game that bad. So I think there's even despite the two losses, there's still positives. So I don't think there's at the moment bigger alarm bells. But if we go into this Blackburn game, a team who look low on confidence, a team who give them an early goal, it'll be really tough to win the game.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Okay, let's talk about players. We've got every month we've got some players returning from long-term injury. This month it was the centre backs of Morrison and Cook. Whilst neither is what I would call match sharp, when we consider them and the new additions, Marty does have a reasonable number in the squad to choose from. At Millwall, we saw a back four of Edwards, Cook, Fox, and Powell. I would like to see Morrison there instead of Fox, to be quite honest with you. And really, I'd like to see Dunne there and move Edwards back over to centre back. Um, but Powell, also wouldn't mind resting him, quite honestly. But we haven't got an alternative. That's the truth. Still haven't got one, despite the transfer window. Um, in midfield, you've got Morgan, Varane, and Field, who still are looking good. And up front, you know what? I think I would go with Yang, Coley, and Sato. I think I've been really impressed with them. So yeah, I would go with them. What about you, George?
I think the team selection depends heavily on what happens on deadline day, doesn't it? And whether Dunn stays and whether Dunn's still at the club and can get over his groin problem, let's just say. So I think defensively, that's the bigger issue, isn't it? I think I would love to see Jimmy Dunne start at right back, but I want to completely echo what you said earlier on. I do not want Harrison Ashby starting at right back because even at Millwall, he looked absolutely horrific when he came onto the pitch.
Yeah.
But then it's just what he does via that. If he has to start Edwards at right back again, then so be it. And I think I agree with you. I'd like to see Morrison back in the team. Perhaps Fox needs a rest. He had a really good run of
He came
running.
in early. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
he had a good run in the team. Bear in mind he had a massive confidence knocker at Portsmouth at home earlier in the season. I think he recovered well from that and he looked a much better centre back. I think I would stick with Powell for this one, and I think if you start Dunn at right back, then I think I'd play Morrison and Edwards. But if you have to start Edwards at right back, I'd go Cook and Morrison. If I'm being honest with you, I think the midfield three I'll keep the same. Although I wouldn't be surprised if he decides to rest Varane. Bear in mind. He's done it before. When there's been quite a fixture congestion, he seems to rest him, and I wouldn't be shocked if he brings in Cole back. And in terms of attacking options, I think Lloyd will be dropped back to the bench, and I think he might start Frey, just because Blackburn are quite physical, and we might want to pin them back. And I don't see him dropping Chair, but this is tough because it's got to the point again where we've got good attacking options, and it's really not a bad issue to have. So I think I would go for Saito and Smith, but I don't think he's going to drop Chair. Um, but if, in my opinion, I'll go for Saito and Smith. I wouldn't start both Saito and Yang because I think they give you that bit of energy from the bench. So keeping one of them there, I think, is important as that outlet from the bench. So yeah, it's just really difficult to predict this one because who knows what can happen with transfers. So.
True. No, no, you're absolutely right. Well, let's move on to talking about transfers. So let's move on to that as the club news. The transfer window is starting to shut. Eventually, we'll slam hard. But before that, we got in Ronnie Edwards on loan at centre back very early on, and he's proven, I think, pretty good. We had Yang Min Hayok as a winger come in, and Harvey Vale, perhaps also brought in to be a winger. I'm not really sure. So let's start with Ronnie Edwards, George. He went straight into the back four, performing well in his second match, and has already been shown to be an asset, albeit a temporary asset for us because he's on loan. So are you happy with the start that Edwards has made, George?
Yeah, no, I'm really pleased. I think what you said there, temporary, is so true. I don't think we have any chance of getting him on a permanent, especially if Southampton get relegated, because he seems like a really, really good player at this level, doesn't he? Especially at centre back. He looks so comfortable playing out from the back. He looks composed on the ball, and it's just I think suits Marty's style of football well in terms of playing out from the back. So for Edwards, I think the key thing was bringing him in so early in the window. Because if we didn't have him, we would have had major, major centre back issues in terms of bringing Sam Field potentially back into centre back if Edwards weren't there. And we all know how that went in terms of the defence looking unbalanced. So
Yeah,
I think bringing him in so early in the window was important. And I think it's proved to be a really good loan signing so far.
yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah, I'm glad we've got him. Well, coming much later in the transfer window to Spurs was Yang after the Korean season had finished. He's an 18-year-old, highly rated. It seemed no sooner had he been shown the facilities at Tottenham than he was being set out of the revolving doors and heading towards West London. He's going to be wearing 47. Well, he is wearing 47 on his shirt. And I think he had a really good debut. Um, Postecoglou, his manager, said it's just to give him a chance to settle into a new culture, a new environment, a new league, a new country. He's very young and we feel he needs to be allowed to settle. So, George, do you think that perhaps Spurs are using QPR as a finishing school for their foreign players?
I think, yeah, it's another one of them, isn't it? Where it's definitely just temporary. We're gonna have him for 6 months, and then he won't play for us again because he's very, very highly rated. And I think it's really exciting. I mean, he had a great cameo when he came on against Millwall. I think that shot that he did with the power he had behind it, and he just looks really quick and nippy. And I've read a couple of reports about him. It says that he has pace, and that's something I've echoed on and on and on about is having other pace options other than Paul Smith. And I think it's really. Yeah, I think it's an exciting one, and Spurs obviously they highly rate him. He did really well out in South Korea. I think he won Player of the Month 4 months in a row. I read somewhere out in South Korea for an 18-year-old. That's really good. So I think to have him for the back end of the season is exciting, and the small sample size that we have, yeah, he looked really good.
Yeah, I was impressed with what we saw of him yesterday. I thought it was very, very good. Um, it's reported that Yang can play on either wing, although he's more used obviously on the right wing, as like we saw. So is he a replacement winger or a cover for both our wingers, do you think?
I don't think he's a replacement because I don't see any of our attacking minded players going. I think, especially with Dembele coming back soon, it'll be really interesting to see how Marty decides to play them. And as I said earlier on in the preview, that we're starting to have the point now where we've got many attacking options, and I think that's something that we didn't have earlier on in the season. The team almost picked itself, but now we're having really not a bad issue to have in terms of not knowing who to play. So I think Yang, yes, he can play on either side. I think Marty will look to play more on the right, potentially switch him out with Smith potentially. So yeah, I think it'll be an interesting one, especially with Dembele coming back. It'll be interesting to see who he sets up with because he seemed to be settled with that midfield three now. So you look at it and there's only room for two attacking players behind a striker. So it'll be interesting to see who Marty picks.
Yeah, I mean, I get the impression from the way that Marty has set up the team and how he really wants them to play that fast wingers is the way to go.
Hmm.
Therefore, if you're doing that for 45 minutes, maybe even 60, you need a break and then bring somebody else on who's fresh again and can go at them again. So for me, that's where I think we're going with this one. And that's great. I'm really pleased. Okay, the other one I was mentioned was Harvey Vale, who's a former Academy Footballer of the Year at Chelsea, and he signed with the R's on a permanent contract. The terms seem to include that Chelsea's waiving any right to a transfer fee, instead opting for a handsome sell-on clause, plus a built-in bonus payment based upon his first team appearances. I think they obviously rate him very well. Um, his loan time at Blackburn Rovers showed that he's got a dogged determination to get past defenders, and he's capable of getting balls into dangerous areas. So, George, should we regard him as a permanent replacement for Loney Saito, perhaps, or again for Chair, or both, perhaps?
I think once again this is exciting because in a different way he signed on a permanent. And
Yeah.
first of all, may I just say I don't think you can look too much into Chelsea getting rid of players. Bear in mind they got rid of Salah and De Bruyne from their academy. So I'm not saying that he's going to be the next Salah. I'm just saying you can't really look into Chelsea's recruitment model because it's an absolute mess. Um, I think. He can play in various different positions. He's played left back, he's played centre midfield, he's played on the right. So I think that's exciting. Someone with such versatility, and perhaps he can give you that pow backup as we've been calling for the whole season because we haven't had a left back behind Powell, so he can give you that. And he impressed in League One with Bristol Rovers. I think he played 47 games in total, and despite only scoring 3 goals, I rave reviews about him. And I saw at the start of the season people saying that we should look to get him in on loan. So no, I think it's an exciting one in a different way to Yang and Edwards in terms of he's our own player. And whether this season's just a mid-table year, you need to look at it in the long term of we've got so many players now with the likes of Morgan, Morrison, Dembele, Vale, Saito if he signs on a permanent, Varane. These are all players who are going to be good for the next 2, 3 years and are still developing and progressing and sellable assets. So I think, especially for the longer term, Vale's a great pickup.
Yeah, I agree with you. Totally agree. I'm wondering actually whether he could even have been brought in as a future solution for the central midfield role, which we thought Anderson or Madsen were going to fill. He's got that sort of look about him that he could easily do that. Anyway, do these three signings fill all the gaps in the squad for you, George?
I think it's definitely good because we've come into this window, and I was worried that we were only going to bring in one or two, and we've already bought in three, and potentially there might be more. Who knows? Because all these the Yang and Vale came out of absolute nowhere. So I think particularly with the Vale, with the versatility that he has and the potential backup to play at left back, because I know he played a couple of times in Europe for Chelsea at left back this season
Yeah.
in the Conference League. So he can obviously cut it at this level, I think. So I think they're free signings in areas that we could do with backup in. I think potentially it's tough to say now that we have Lloyd who's playing well, Collie can play up there, and Frey. I still want another striker, and that might be greedy, but I just want someone who's clinical at this level and who's more consistently scoring goals. And I know they're really tough to come by, but in my ideal world, I'd love another striker.
Yeah, I know where you're coming from. For me, I perhaps would be also looking at a left back, some cover for Paul. I think it's too much on him at the moment. Anyway, talking of wingers, I should also mention another signing, but not for the first team, for the academy. 15-year-old Callan Brunson had a trial with us as a defender and has now joined the club. One for the future, I think. Very much one that we can hope for to see in the first team soon. I wish him well. Um, Going the other way, we have Everton Santos. He's joining Portuguese side Vitória on loan, albeit with an option to buy. Do you feel he never really got a proper chance to adapt to the championship and settle in, George?
I think that he had his opportunity. I remember the Sheffield Wednesday away game where he started in his natural right back position, and then Middlesbrough at home where he started at left back.
Mm.
And it's really tough to say when a new player comes to a division and he's still young, but he just didn't look like he was good enough for the level. And it's really tough to say that for someone so young, but he just didn't look good enough, I don't think. So if he goes out on loan and gains some confidence, and maybe if he doesn't get bought, they'll come back and be a different player. But it's just tough with Santos because I think we could see initially. I know he scored in the cup against Luton and everything, but I just think everyone could see that he weren't good enough for the level. And I think Marty's quite ruthless with these things because there's been players, particularly last year with Drew as well, who is back at Oxford City. So that kind of shows that the level that some of our academy players were last year. But Marty's quite ruthless with it in terms of if he doesn't think you're good enough, you'll be shut out of the first team squad. So it's a shame for him because I just don't think he's good enough.
No, that's fair enough. We should finish this section by mentioning the continuing speculation regarding Jimmy. Xavi said that he didn't start because of a groin strain, difficult to say that. But many fans still expect him to be able to pass a medical for the Blades. If he goes, I will be very, very sorry because he's beaten all established right backs to make that position his, and also because of his work in the community. What about you, George?
I think it'd be really sad for him to go. And Jimmy's been such a big player for us this year, and in so many different ways. In both boxes, he's been so good in the air. And ever since Marty's moved into that right back position, he's been such a revelation, I think. So it's really sad to see him go. But you've got to look at it from his perspective. He's got 6 months left on his contract. I know it's reported that we've offered him a deal, but he's 27 years old, and if he ended up going to Sheffield United, he'd be on bit more wages than he would be with us, and it could be his last bigger move in his career. But you then look at it the other way of, is he a fool of doing it? Because if Sheffield United get promoted, there's no chance of him playing in the Premier League. Because you see it with players, especially with Ipswich last season. They brought in so many players just at Championship quality. They go up to the Premier League and they just don't get any opportunity. So it's a real tough one for him. If we can get any sort of money, I think it was reported this morning that we want 3 million for him, which I
Yeah.
think with 6 months left on his contract, perhaps you could argue is a bit unfair because it's only 6 months left on his deal. It's a really tough one. Either way, for him personally, we'd love to see him stay at the club, and I'd love for him to sign that new deal and become one of them players who spends his a one club career. But for him, if he can get bigger wages at Sheffield United, then you're going to take it, aren't you?
Yeah, yeah, and you mentioned the 3 million that was rumored today, and that's also rumored to have put Sheffield United off, and they're looking elsewhere, maybe at Palace. But I don't know. It's all up in the air. We only got a few days left, so we'll have to wait and see, I guess. Um, so that brings us round, I suppose, to prediction time. What's your prediction for Tuesday's match against Blackburn, George?
I think it'll be a really tight game. I really do. I think it could go either way in terms of if we concede early, it'll become a really tough game. But I'll look at it from a more optimistic standpoint, and it might not seem like an optimistic scoreline, but I think we're going to draw 0-0. And I know it's a really boring result, but I think that's just the sort of game I can see it being. Move from a Saturday to a Tuesday night. It won't be that great of a crowd. They won't bring many fans at all. I can just see it being a 0-0, to be honest with you. So that's my prediction. And that's thinking more with my head than my heart. My heart would love to say we're going to nick it 1-0, but yeah, I'm going 0-0.
All right. Judging from past meetings and the positions in the championship, this cannot be an easy game to win. That said, we haven't played well. I don't think well enough anyway in the last two games, and I've got a feeling that the team may well be looking to do something special. Uh, so I'm hoping that we're going to get the first goal and then settle down. And if that happens, we can win. So I'm going to stick my neck out and go with my heart for a 1-0 win.
Fingers
Um,
crossed. I hope so. I really do hope so.
okay, well, our time is up. So can I end by saying that the next preview show will feature George and myself again as we preview the championship clash that's away against Coventry on Tuesday the 11th. We hope you enjoyed the podcast, and my thanks to George as ever for his efforts. Get well quickly, Marty. We love you. And from all of us at Hoops and Dreams, it is, as always, come on, you R's.
How many hours?